joining me for this episode of Nextbiteoflife.com podcast. My name is Kem, and as usual, I'll be your host. Today's episode is all about fear. Actually, I call it Fear is the Mind Killer. And I'll tell you why in just a little bit. With all that's happening around the world today, I think anybody who says they're not scared would just be lying. There are so many incidents, acts of terrorism, cowardly terrorism, I might add, that's going on all over the world. You can't say you haven't heard of what happened in Brussels just recently. The attack and the loss of innocent lives at the airport and at the metro station. What's happened in Istanbul. What's happening in Ivory Coast. What's happening in Nigeria, which is my home country. It's very sad that there are some radical Muslims who insist on doing damage to the rest of the world and have an agenda that's just too cruel and too unthinkable. But that's just the way of life nowadays, and we have to get used to it. So fear is very real, and it's very human. It's a very human emotion, and so you shouldn't feel bad about feeling fear. However, you should let fear have your ears and not your balls. The actual blog post it's titled, Why Fear Should Have Your Ears But Not Your Balls. But because I was trying to leave it clean for iTunes, I couldn't say that. So I changed it to Fear is the Mind Killer. The steps of fear that I listed on the blog post, the first thing I discussed is fear and your ears. I think in the new world, we have to pay more attention to our surroundings. We're so used to letting everything go by the wayside and only being concerned about ourselves. It's time we started looking out for everybody else. When you think about it, you just never know whose lives you may save. Imagine, I'm totally guilty of this too. I'm so busy with my iPhone and playing games and talking on the phone or, being on the computer that you fail to observe what's going on around you. I think if we really took the time and we looked around, we might be able to spot some things before they actually happen. And if you see it, then you definitely want to call attention to it. Get the security guards. Get the police. Anything. There's signs to look for. If you go to the government website, it'll tell you what to look for when somebody is attempting terrorism, like body language signs, excessive sweating, for instance, nervousness, like their Adam's apple is bubbling up and down, and I always get a little bit nervous when I see that it's 99 degrees outside and somebody comes in wearing a huge jacket. There's no reason for it. So let's be vigilant too and help them out. Let's not leave it all to the security people who are usually too busy making sure that you don't bring your, 500cc bottle of water into the airport. It almost makes you mad because you're thinking to yourselves, well, shouldn't you be out looking for the actual terrorists? But no, Lord forbid. We have to bring in that big bottle of perfume. We have to confiscate it, at the security checkpoint. So anyway, when you hear that overhead announcement that says, do not leave your baggage unattended, listen, observe, check around you. Don't be so involved in your stuff that you forget that there are people out there looking to do damage to everybody else. So that's the first point. The second point is fear and your eyes. It is so easy to judge people. I know nerves are so afraid at the moment. Everybody's afraid that every Muslim that they see is out to get them. But that's not true. It's only a few, just a few. Thankfully, it's just a few of them that want to hurt us. So don't judge the person that you see just because she's wearing a hijab. They're just ordinary people who are going about their lives. They don't want any murder and mayhem more than you do. They just want to go home to their loved ones. So don't let your hatred, don't let your fear affect the way you see people. It's a good world, and most people are still good. And we can't start retaliating for what this small number of people have done. You need to step back and observe and see them for what they are, people just like you. Have you noticed that every time they catch one of those terrorists, they're always this young men who have been led to believe that there's a wonderful life ahead of them. Nobody's bothered telling them that there is no other life. This is it. There's no next life. I believe that when you die, you just die. Unfortunately, they don't believe that. The promises of 7 Vestal virgins when they go to the next life is too appealing to them, and they feel like they need some structure, and they're easily swayed because their families, the parents are too busy doing their own work and too busy with everything else, and they don't pay as much attention as they would have liked to their kids. So unfortunately, these kids go to the worst place they could probably go to, which is the mosque. You send them to the mosque just like you send kids to the church. And unfortunately, it's like a breeding ground for terrorism, at least from what I observe from the news. This is where most of these terrorist cells do their recruiting. And so the kids are vulnerable to listening to this because they don't have this structure at home. And they believe these people. They believe the lies that they're being sold. And they go off and do things like blowing themselves up. The leaders never do that. They send the idiots that don't. They send the idiots to go out and do that. But you've got to just let your fear get rationalized. Do not react. We hopefully will leave that to our leaders who don't seem to be doing anything. Unfortunately, it seems like while we're worrying, the leaders are there and they're trying. I think they're sort of, they don't know or they don't want to use as much force as is necessary. It's kind of new for them too, I think. But still, we expect a little bit more of our leaders. They're so busy worrying about stupid, silly things instead of worrying about the real danger. I think to them it was okay in the good old days when it happened in the third world countries. And it was like, oh, okay, so it's happening over there. It's always there. But now it's moving closer and closer. It's like a boil that's allowed to get infected because people don't pay attention to this little blister, and it turns into something really huge. And now it's almost at the point where they don't know what to do, but they need to figure it out because the world is depending on them. So let's hope that things get handled pretty quickly. Because to tell you the truth, I'm, bored and sad every time I hear something like this happens. And the next thing you know, they bring out their standard speech. I call it the compassionate letter. I picture it in the drawer somewhere, and they bring it out, and you know how it sounds. It goes something like, our hearts go out to the people of insert whatever city it is. We condemn this type of violence. But it's all talk. And as soon as they finish doing that, they put it right back into the drawer, and it goes on. And when the next one happens, then they bring it out again, dust it off, and repeat. We don't want that. We want them to actually act and protect us. This is what they were put there to do. The third point is fear and your nerves. It's quite okay to be nervous about world events. You should be nervous about everything you do in life because nothing is guaranteed. Nobody says that you couldn't die just by stepping out of your front door. Of course you're nervous about going to work. Who knows if the cab driver is going to run off and run you over without knowing that they did. How many people get run over by drunk drivers and lose their lives that very second? How many people go leaving their house saying goodbye to their parents going to school and end up being shot to death? And there's so much horrible things, and it's just mind-boggling, the number of horrible things that are going on in the world. But you can't let that stop you. It doesn't stop you from going to work. It doesn't stop you from hanging out with your friends. You can't let fear win. My favorite saying is by Frank Herbert. He was the writer of the sci-fi novel Dune. I'm going to read what it says and hope that it makes sense. But this is what I try to live my life by. And every time I feel fearful, I always think of this. And here it goes. It says, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. I think it's so deep. I think it's something that you should keep in mind every time the fear comes along. It's very powerful to me, and I hope it's powerful to you too. The last part is fear and your guts. I'm substituting the guts for the title of the podcast, because I have to keep it clean, of course. You've got to tell fear, no thank you. I'm holding on to my gonads. You need to own your fear. You cannot let it stop you. Fear of an earthquake doesn't stop you from living in California, does it? Fear of a tsunami doesn't stop you from living in Japan. You can't let it stop you. You must go on with your life. If you have plans to travel, I think you should stick to them. We definitely plan on making fear non-existent. We're going to be cautious. We're going to let fear have our ears, and we're going to keep an eye out for bad things, but we're not going to let it stop us. We've already made our plans. In the near future, we're going off on a little journey, which you'll see on the website in a couple of weeks. We're not going to let it stop us from changing our plans at all. This is exactly what they want. This is how they win. They want to draw everybody else into their fight, and we're not going to engage. We're going to keep on living our lives, because living well is the best revenge. So if you've already got your plans, don't let it change you. There's so many things out there that you need to discover. Go to London, go to Paris, go to Brussels, go to Istanbul. We loved all those places. We'll be back. And we love new places, and we'll go there. A lot of the people that we met in Istanbul were so nice. Wonderful, warm people. The food is gorgeous, just like in Nigeria. And a lot of people, Muslims and Christians, get along. And so we can't let them break us apart. We have good food, good drinks, good everything. So that's what you must live by. You must go on. And my last point is to travel on, just like I said. Travel on. Do your research. Check out the government websites. Don't go to hotbed places. I mean, you can be cautious, but you don't want to be foolhardy and go to all those places that you shouldn't go to, or that have been known to be like hotbeds of terror. But as far as every place else, you have got to keep on living, because you can't guarantee that terror is not going to come to your doorstep. Anyway, it's a short podcast for this week, and I hope you can learn something, that fear doesn't own you. You have got to live your life. Anyway, you can get on the website, nextbiteoflife.com, and see the post that goes along with this podcast, as well as some amazing pictures from different countries. I hope you like them. as usual, I hope that you leave us good feedback on this podcast. Actually, any feedback. We welcome any constructive criticism on the podcast that we've been bringing you. Hopefully, you have enjoyed it and you have learned a thing or two. Anyway, I thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and we will talk. Actually, I will talk next time, hopefully with some more amazing interviews with expats and some more of our travels. Until next time, have a good day, and thank you again for joining me on the Nextbiteoflife.com podcast. Bye.